So, like the title of the video says, we're going to be going over my Amara dot build. So, before we actually get into the nitty gritty of what the build is, I want to talk about what the build is not. I'm not a big fan of anointments, so I will be trying to refrain from using any of the OP anointments wherever possible. This is an anoint-less build. I may or may not actually use some specific anointments, just because they don't really affect anything too much. One example would be the Hedgehog. I have action skill and projectile speed increased. I don't view that as being OP at all. The only reason that it's even on here, like I didn't farm for an anointed version, it's just I happened to get an elemental hedgehog with it and I didn't want to try to farm for it anymore. So if you do see an anointment, it's usually irrelevant to the build. So that being said, this can be run on any difficulty currently in the game. It can be ran on Mayhem. One thing to note, if you're double, triple down, it is going to hurt your numbers a lot. This is not going to be a build that can overcome absolutely any modifier without, feeling it. So that being said, it does perform very well, especially if you're neutral. If you have like gun down or certain types of downs all stacked, you're gonna feel it a lot. That being said, I've ran a lot of maps with this build, and I've always been able to finish them. Sometimes it's just harder. I'm sure you guys have felt the same way with Mayhem. It has gotten a little better recently, but just expect some of that. So this entire build's um, functionality is based on one single item, and that is the Nimbus class mod. So this is a legendary class mod for Amara. Whenever Amara damages an enemy with her action skill, this is a lie. She doesn't actually have to damage an enemy. She just has to use her action skill. So if you use the normal phase grab ability, it's gonna pop a cloud out. I don't know why it says on damage, but it's not true. She creates a damaging cloud of her action skill element at that location. So we'll come back to that action skill element. It's pretty basic, but it's important. The cloud damage is very low. We don't care at all about the cloud damage at all. So we won't be taking any action skill damage increases. What we're going after is the actual dot damage that the Nimbus can apply. The cool thing about this is I'm not 100% sure how the internals work, but I don't believe that the Nimbus Cloud actually has a dot damage, so it inherits whatever gun damage or possibly dot damage you are using. I can't really differentiate them too well. I should probably do the math on all that to figure it out. The only reason I haven't is because the best weapon to use it for is pretty clear in either case, and that is the Kill-A-Wisp. So we'll come back to weapon selection in a second, but just know the Nimbus is what you need. The best rolls that you're going to find on the Nimbus is weapon damage. Look for a weapon damage class mod. It's going to increase your damage with all of your guns, and therefore it's going to increase all of your dot damage with all of your guns. So things that affect dot damage beyond just straight dot damage is going to be anything that boosts elemental or weapon. Things that are not going to work are anything that's tagged as bonus. So if you look in your skill tree, for Amara at least, personal space is bonus damage. That will never increase your dot damage. Bonus damage is always applied after the fact, after you hit the enemy. They may look like the same number, it looks like the numbers combine, but so does shotgun pellets. So just keep in mind that any bonus elemental damage or bonus damage in general is not going to increase the damage of your dots. So we won't be taking any of those skills. We'll go over the actual skill selection after we get through the items. So our artifact is also, I wouldn't say super fixed, but this is what I found to be the best option. We have Elemental Projector Victory Rush. So we have a damage boost for whatever elemental effect we are currently afflicted with. So we are going to be running with a gun that applies status elements to us. So just keep in mind, this is a combo. It's going to require a gun slot and the artifact itself. And then we also run Victory Rush. So Victory Rush, whenever we kill a badass, we gain movement speed and damage. There's not a lot of artifacts that are increasing your damage for like guns or elemental and stuff like that. A lot of it's like melee oriented. So just keep in mind, you're either going to go defensive or offensive. I chose to go offensive. This is a full offensive build right now. Maybe once we get the level cap increase, we're going to go into some of the green tree and get some defense. But for now, this is full offense. For our grenade slot, we're going to be using the Firestorm most of the time. Hexes are okay, but with all of the nerfs to the Hex grenade, the duration is just not super reliable, and the elemental damage is good. The status procs can be good, and they're very decent AoE as well, but they're just too unreliable. I don't like having to throw multiple grenades to get a dot rolling. And my Diluvian Firestorm is incredibly reliable. This is the one that I would recommend running on this. It it spawns many grenades when you throw it, and each one of them deals full dot damage if it happens to proc. So it's very good at applying that enormous 3,500 damage dot. Um, as well, it's pretty respectable DPS. Even though they nerfed it, it still does pretty decent direct damage. Finally, we have our shield choice. This is a little personal preference. Realize we're going to be running a lot of offense, so I opted to go with the stopgap. This gives me an immunity phase if I really need to get out. I can usually. Just know this is sort of an open slot. You can kind of put whatever you want here. Ward is not going to be great. Rough Rider isn't going to be that great either because you don't have a lot of health regen in this build. So you're not going to be able to get up to health gate. Front loader is all right. It's a little scarier because once your shield is broken, that's when you kind of know to get out. So this isn't super great as we don't have a lot of shield talents. Transformer is going to be going against our build if we're ever trying to apply a shock to ourselves. So I would highly recommend stopgap, but use whatever you think is going to be best for you. Jumping into guns. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our Nimbus gun. So Nimbus applies based on the damage or the dot damage of whatever gun you have equipped when you're applying the dot through Nimbus. So we want the biggest dot damage we can find. The Killer-Wisp does absolutely enormous damage. I believe it is dot based, not actual just flat weapon based, but I could be wrong about that. And the Killer-Wisp just puts on an enormous dot. It won't change to shock. It will be whatever your action skill element is. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, Killer-Wisp is the biggest dot damage I've seen so far. Mine is binary, very sadly. You do not want a binary. You want the normal variant so that you don't have the, I think it's 30% damage down. So my dot would actually be much higher if I had a non-binary Kill of the Wisp. So just keep that in mind. You want a non-binary variant for any dot gun because you don't want the damage cut on your dots. So now we're going to get into our elemental projector weapon. I am currently using the hazardous sellout. This only comes in fire and corrosive, at least if my 2-hour farm of this quest is to be believed. I've never seen it roll shock, and I really wanted it to. So the hazardous sellout is going to be very reliable. It has a very high dot chance, and it has 3 pellets in its main shot. You don't care about the damage on this. I took a low damage one on purpose because you don't want your dot to kill you. So firing this off, we can pretty much every single time apply a dot to ourselves. It's very important for this gun to be reliable. Now, in shock variants, I haven't found something as good as Sellout. The only thing I can currently think of is Thunderball Fist, possibly. But whatever the variant is, whatever gun you pick, you need to be picking a gun that you can farm at lower levels so that you don't kill yourself with the dot. Shock is going to be particularly dangerous to you because a lot of our defense comes from our shield being up, and we don't want to blow that invulnerability phase from stopgap unless we absolutely have to. So, these are the two mainstays. You're going to have your Killowist all the time, and then you're going to have a sellout or something for shock whenever the time comes if you're switching your element to shock. And then for our main guns, you're going to have two guns. You're going to have a primary gun that you're just going to use for mobbing, and then you're going to have a secondary gun that you're going to use to apply additional dots. So first of all, let's try to talk about the primary gun. I really love the Wester gun. It has a very respectable dot damage. It has an okay dot chance. It's incredibly easy to farm. It comes in all variants, all elemental variants. So the Wester gun is probably going to be your best bet for your primary slot, and you're always going to have two elements that you can apply with it, right? You're going to be able to apply a shock and a fire dot at the same time and stack a lot of these things simultaneously. So talking about elemental variants, I would probably recommend fire and shock and radiation and corrosive. So those two sets are probably what I would recommend the most, and I do have both sets in here. The other gun that I would recommend for your primary is going to be the Tsunami. Now the Tsunami fires normal bullets, so you'll actually see it fire normal bullets most of the time, but every once in a while it'll fire out a volley of shock or corrosive pellets. These can apply dots. All of these can apply dots, and the dot damage is pretty respectable. It is a very respectable amount of dot damage. So let me go ahead and grab phase graphs just so I can show you the dot damage a little bit. Oh, I should not have my Nimbus on for this effect, huh? It's going to be way too strong. So you can see the dots are nothing to sneeze at. Granted, that is a trash mob, but the DPS, even on just one of them, is very respectable considering I have nothing rolling right now. I don't have any skills in my skill tree. I really have nothing going on. So the Tsunami does a really decent job, and you don't have to be swapping modes or guns or anything to apply shock and corrosive. Now, it never does apply fire, so I would recommend running Tsunami when you're running your action skill element as fire. I would recommend running the Wester gun when you're not having that situation. So that covers it for the main guns. My backup guns are pretty varied. I use the Hedgehog, an elemental variant. It has really good dot damage. Its dot chance isn't super great, but the AoE and the direct damage are very helpful in some situations. The new gun, Fearmonger, is a great dot applicator. It has incredibly high dot chance. Mine is binary. Very sadly, I'm trying to get a non-binary variant. The dot damage should jump up to like 1500 in that case, and it'll be very, very strong. I want a radiation one as well, just for how my builds are kind of working out. So the Fearmonger is also a really great option. Finally, I would recommend the Firestorm or the Storm, whichever variant you need to fill out your elemental loadout. Both of these deal splash damage. They both have very high status chances. Their status damages are okay. They're not incredibly great for them being snipers, but they do a lot of AoE. So in those kind of situations where you can just indiscriminately aim, you don't have to really worry about headshots or anything. It's going to do you very well with both of these weapons. So that's what I would recommend as your secondaries. Personally, I've been kind of running around with Fearmonger and Tsunami, and then running my action skill as Fire, and that gives me 4 elemental dots at a time. It's been running really well. That being said, you can kind of run whatever configuration your guns have given you. whatever configuration you want to, whatever your personal preference is. Just try to stack as many dots as you can at a time. So now that we're through the equipment, I'm going to try to go through the skill tree. It's going to be pretty quick. I think a lot of this is obvious, but I'll kind of talk about it as I go through. So Anima, this is our status effect damage and duration. This is very obvious. One thing to note is that the action skill status effect damage is what's going to apply to Nimbus. It does not stack with the normal status effect damage, so we're only going to be getting the 40%. But other than that, this is just a no-brainer skill. Same with Tempest. We want to increase all elemental damage. Of course we do. It's what this entire build is about. We're going to be dropping points into Wildfire, so whenever we apply a status effect to one enemy, it has a chance to jump to another enemy. A lot of this is going to be AoE, and whenever it jumps through Wildfire, it reapplies the Anima buff. So Anima will stack every time this thing jumps through Wildfire. So just keep in mind these two synergize very, very well. Now from here, we can go Ties That Bind. I don't personally like this skill for the dot build. It's a very strong skill in general, but just know dot damage is not transferred through the chains. So it doesn't super help us in this situation. So we're going to actually go down to Fist over Matter. So we need to spend a few more points. We're going to grab Deep Well because most of our weapons are going to be elemental. The Tsunami does not get a benefit from this because it is not inherently elemental. So keep that in mind. We're going to grab Dread because we're going to be grabbing enemies a lot, and gun damage is always good for dots as well. We have 3 more points to get down here. We can take Infusion. I highly recommend against it. It's not super great, and it's bad for dots in general. So we're going to take Steady Hands. This is just going to give us some accuracy for our SMGs, our shotguns. It's not going to do much for snipers or a lot of the other guns, but Steady Hands is going to help us out sometimes. So we're going to grab Fist over Matter. We're going to grab Allure. So we're going to basically try to pile as many enemies into a ball as possible and apply a bunch of dots to them. Moving on. I told you I was going to go fast. Over here, we're going to deal Violent Tapestry. We're going to grab all the points in here. We don't care about Do Harm. The cloud damage does not actually affect the dot damage, so just know Do Harm is not going to help us here at all. We're going to grab all the points for cooldown. This is somewhat good because we're not using Phase Zerker. It doesn't get like mitigated, so just you can put points somewhere else if you want to, but I think Restless is probably the play here. Now from here, it's kind of personal choice. I personally love Fast Hands. It's reload speed, weapon swap speed, and mode switch speed. So mode switch speed is going to be very nice if you're using the Wester gun or similar guns like that. So Fast Hands is going to be great in general though. So from here, we need to get down into our next tier. We can kind of spend points wherever. I think Ascendant is probably necessary for that pull range on our Allure. And then we need 1 more point to get down. So pick here probably. Do you want more reload speed or do you want more accuracy and crit damage? Personally, I think this is a better stat. It's just more stat points for each point you spend. I think this is okay if you stack it really high. Even with diminishing returns, I think you need a couple points in alacrity for it to matter. So I think Transcend is probably the play here, but this is just personal preference. You're going to want to grab everything from this row. These are all 3 going to be really great for this build. Now you have 1 more point to get down to your final capstone. Rush stacks tend to increase the effect, I've noticed, not the actual application or any like utility around it. They just increase what they do. I don't think we'll need more than this for Violent Tapestry. We're not going into Do Harm. I think Do Harm is probably the best place if you're gonna take Awakening stacks. But that's not what this build is focused around. So I'm actually just gonna put another point into Transcend. So that gives us a little bit more stats, and we get down here. Now we have 2 points left. You can kind of spend these wherever you want to. I think a good place to spend them would be in Clarity. This is going to give you a little bit of health regen, just help you boost your health back up, get you over life gate sometimes when your shield has recharged. So Clarity is good. You can finish off Transcend. You can put a couple points in Alacrity if you want. There's a lot of options that you can go with here. you can get some lifesteal as well. So it really depends. I'm not even going to put them in. It doesn't matter where you put them. A couple of these will be better than others. Like Remnant's not going to do you anything. Um, so let's go ahead and take a look at what the map modifiers are. So we have plus elemental damage, minus normal, minus radiation, less critical. So this is actually going to be a kick-ass map for what we're doing. So take this with a grain of salt when I hit some of these enemies. And let's go ahead and convert to fire type. So I'm just over here in Pandora in the Droughts, and let's take a look and see what this can do. So this is our tsunami. So this is shock and corrosive on flesh. That's how quickly he died. I didn't really even DPS him. Let's look at our grenade, see what it looks like. So we can get through the shield very easily. You see, once we get to health, annihilated. So our dot damage is incredibly strong. And we're going to do a little test here. So I'm going to pull out my low level damage applicator, or my dot applicator, and I'm going to apply Nimbus now. Now, notice how quickly their health is going down. This is with Slam and probably some Conflux procs. You know, it wasn't that respectable. You know, it killed a couple like normal enemies. That's very whatever. It's not great. Not great at all. But if we pull out the Kill-A-Wisp, we wait for that proc to go off, and you should see them they just pop. They're gone. So whenever you're applying dots, if you notice your Nimbus dots aren't doing very well, switch your gun. You probably forgot to be using Kill-A-Wisp. That being said, running Nimbus on your main level 50 guns does not feel incredibly bad. So what I would kind of recommend, this is what I do, is I run my normal guns and I just lift people and use Nimbus on them normally, unless there's like a badass, and then I'll switch to Kill-A-Wisp to just, you know, wreck them. So we're going to try to find a badass real quick. Also, notice that Tsunami really didn't, the spread on Tsunami is a lot tighter than it would normally be, just because of the accuracy bonuses that we've got. Let's go ahead and pull out our secondary as well. So this is the Fearmonger. Oh, why did the ghost leave her? What was that about? But it is a very respectable weapon. Not great at range, as you can see. It's pretty difficult to apply these at range. I think we actually have radiation down too. So yeah, this gun's going to be half as effective as it should be. So keep that in mind as well. Hoping still for a badass somewhere, maybe. Where's the ghost? Oh, did I not? I didn't get a dot proc that time. What is this kid doing? Alright. So, we may not run into a badass. I'm kind of confused. Hopefully one comes down this ramp right here. Come on. There's some enemies over here. Maybe there's a Tink running around. This is just an example of, like, yeah, if enemies group up, the AoE on this build is pretty gnarly. Am I really not gonna get a whole one badass? Like, this is crazy. Oh. Didn't get it. Oh, here we go. Here we go. So here's an example. We can whip out this. Oh, or we can not. We can instantly die when we could actually show what the build can do. Cool. Alright, so we're going to lift him up. We're going to switch to Kill-A-Wisp to get the application. So that's a badass, just, yeah. It feels really good when you get a proc on a badass. It's very common, but it still feels really nice when you see those big giant dot ticks coming out. I guess I should probably kill him, huh? Or not. So yeah, that's gonna be it for my my build guide. If you guys have any additions, questions, concerns, comments, let me know in the section below. Otherwise, thanks for watching, guys.